Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have reached 100 subs. It's crazy. Thank you so much, and if you haven't subbed yet, then please make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So I was browsing the internet doing my regular Palantir research, and I found a 10-year-old presentation by Palantir, which I think is a must-watch for investors who want to invest into Palantir. And the reason why it is a must-watch is because it explains, it shows a demonstration of how Palantir works at JP Morgan. And I think it gives you, one of the worst things about Palantir is that it's very hard to understand what they do. The product is a very high-end product and I don't have access to it. So you basically have to build belief in a company where you don't see the product. And I believe that they are going to address this later on. And this is also part of why, Palantir is a diamond in the rough, and the early guys who can see it are going to profit like crazy from it. I want to help you see this opportunity the way that I see it, and we can take it from there. So before we go on to this presentation, one very important point to see that is not mentioned in the presentation is that I read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 book where he talks actually about Palantir, and he explains that many people misunderstand artificial intelligence, and they think that artificial intelligence is going to replace jobs. And what you're going to see in this presentation is that, is also what Peter Thiel explains, that artificial intelligence is fantastic at a thing that it does, which is gathering and analyzing large sets of data. And then humans are fantastic at making decisions with that data, but they suck at being able to analyze large data chunks. So it's very important to see in this presentation, like, how good Palantir is able to show an analyst, a financial analyst who is looking for a financial crime, where the red lights are, and then it is the analyst that is, with the help of Palantir, is able to ask the right questions and then find the financial crime. So I don't want to take more of your time. I will show you the end of this video where they do the presentation. The original video I'm going to link in the description box below. It's worth a watch, but this is the most important part of it. So thank you again, and I see you in the next video.
So I'd now like to transition to talk about how Pheonix is actually being used by one of our partners today, JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase is a massive financial institution. They employ on the order of 300,000 employees, have around 100 million customers that own over 200 million accounts. And their customers, in their interactions with the bank on a daily basis, generate over 1 billion logged events per day. So massive amounts of data. And JP Morgan faces many of the same challenges that a sovereign nation or modern intelligence organization faces. They have data silos, they have data scale, they have data sharing laws, and they have an ocean of legitimate activity in which illicit actors are hiding. To be more precise, JP Morgan is involved in a variety of lines of business. They have a retail checking business, they have an investment banking business, they have a credit card business, a home lending business, and so on and so on. And each one of those lines of business has their own databases, their own way of accessing data, their own way of providing it to their customers. Further, their customers interact with them through a variety of different channels. So what I mean by that is they're accessing their accounts online, through telephone calls, through ATM transactions, through in-person transactions at local branches. And each one of those transactions is again stored in a different database in a different format. Now, illicit actors recognize how hard it is for the bank to correlate all of this activity across these various lines of business and these various channels. So what we'll see is the more sophisticated actors will cross channels, cross lines of business to concoct their schemes. So what we need is a solution that brings all that data into one common environment. And as you've heard, it's a common refrain at this point. That's what Palantir is doing for them. So with that, I'm actually going to dive in and show you a real live demo of the type of analysis that Palantir is enabling at JP Morgan Chase today. So what you see on the screen here, these three gray icons, represent online profiles. So these would be the usernames that you'd use to log in to do your online banking on, in this case, chase.com. We identified these three online profiles have had some suspicious activity associated with their account using one of the Hadoop queries that I mentioned earlier. Now, in and of itself, there are often false positives when you look for specific fraudulent patterns. So I want to dive into the activity associated with these profiles, as well as the transactional activity on their accounts to see if there's something strange going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is take these 3 online profiles and query out to the online logs to see which devices have been accessing them. We have some missing images, but at the top here would represent a device. So this is a physical piece of hardware that is accessing an account. JP Morgan uses device fingerprinting so that they can denote when there's a specific laptop that is, or a specific computer that is accessing multiple accounts. This device will then use a browser. So here you can see that this one is using Firefox 3513. It could be using Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, and these are often fingerprints of specific Trojans, or like a Zeus will use a specific browser string that you can identify as fraudulent activity. These browsers will then connect to online profiles through session events. And these session events have IP addresses associated with them, as well as the time and date and the URLs that were visited during the specific online session. So what you see on the screen here is in fact particularly interesting to me as an investigator. I had 3 online profiles, and they were both accessed by the same 2 pieces of hardware represented here at the top. So you can see that they've accessed all 3. So now immediately I've identified something that actually what I'm interested in is not necessarily these 3 online profiles, but rather the 2 devices that have accessed them. So I'm now going to query out again to the web logs, now using this key value, in order to see what other activity these specific devices have been involved in. And you can see immediately that these devices have been involved in an exceptional amount of online activity. To be precise, the 2 devices have accessed 59 different customer profiles. Now, this is interesting. It makes me think that there's something going on, but it isn't in and of itself indicative of fraud. We often see that computers located in internet cafes and airports, or computers owned by the bank itself, will be accessing this number of profiles on a regular basis. So you can't merely create an automated solution to stop this type of activity. However, I can now dive into this activity a little bit more to see if there are, in fact, strange things going on. So here you can see all the IP addresses which have been used by these specific devices. I'm going to take them and drag them over to the map application to see where this activity is in fact coming from. You can see here with the U.S. Bank, as you'd expect, a lot of activity going on around New York, some activity down in Texas, and some in the central United States. But immediate red flag, you can see that there's some activity which is coming from Nigeria. You can then use the timeline to dive in to see when this activity is actually occurring. And you can see that when I select the Nigerian access, it highlights in yellow down on the bottom. And I can drill into this activity, and you can see that this yellow bars representing the Nigerian access is interspersed with the red bars representing the access from the United States within the span of an hour. Now, unless somebody has a teleporter that is allowing them to travel from Nigeria to the United States, this is clearly indicative of use of a proxy. And beyond that, it's showing that the individual using these devices is clearly trying to hide where their access is coming from. Again, they're trying to get around the automated systems, which may say, don't allow access from IPs that aren't within physical proximity to the actual customer. So I'm now pretty sure that there's some strange things going on with these specific with this online access, but I'm still not quite sure what the activity is and what I should be concerned about. So what I'm going to do is pull out the online profiles which have had the most access to them and dive into their transactional information. So I'm going to remove all these other online profiles. Now, it's important to note that I'm not deleting them from my investigation. And in fact, if I wanted to use the history tab, I could return to this previous state in the investigation. This is just simply allowing me to explore a hypothesis. So given these 4 online profiles, I'm now going to query out to the transactional logs to see what the activity on their bank accounts has been. And then I'll just take a second to arrange things so you can see what's going on. So this is the point at which Palantir actually starts to get really interesting for me as a user. At first, we were merely conducting analysis across one data source. But what I've done is marry that data source, the online logs, with the transactional logs. So you can see here, these gray profiles, again, the online profiles, are owned by physical customers. We have the demographic information associated with the physical customer, addresses, email addresses, employers, etc. And then we can see their accounts that they own with the bank. And here you can see that these accounts actually stretch across multiple lines of business. So Elizabeth Larson has a personal home equity line of credit, a personal checking account, a joint checking account, etc. So returning to sort of my role as an investigator, I see two things which are particularly interesting to me. First is that Gevrok Evimenko and GE Minerals share an online profile. So they're both using RockMan87 and RockBiz87 to access their accounts. They appear to definitely be affiliated with one another. Then I also see that Elizabeth Larson and Gevrok Evimenko share access to a joint checking account. Now, in order to see if that makes sense, I'm going to see where these customers live. So I'm going to drag and drop them over to the map, and I'll just turn off. And we can see that over in LA, in Englewood, California, that Gevrok Evimenko and GE Minerals share an address at a residential location in Englewood, California. Yet they're sharing access to an account that is owned by Elizabeth Larson, who lives over in the northeast side of the United States in Augusta, Maine. That's about a 7.5-hour flight for those who aren't familiar with the United States. So some very suspicious activity. Why is this joint checking account being shared between Elizabeth and Gevrok Evimenko? So now what I'm going to do is to see if these accounts themselves are connected through any transactions, as well as to see if they're connected with any accounts external to the bank. So when I do that, you can see that immediately there appear to be some transactions moving out to the Bank of China. We can also see that there appear to be some transactions between these accounts. So if I just take a second to arrange them, we can see that they're all connected. Now if I use the flows helper to see to visualize how the money is actually moving between these accounts, the red orbs, which are representing the actual flow of money, we can see sort of moving from left to right an explicit story of fund exfiltration and money laundering. We can see that the personal home equity line of credit, Elizabeth Larson is withdrawing funds from the home equity line of credit. Very normal transactions. This is how people extract cash from their home equity line of credit. It's going to her personal checking account and also directly to her joint checking account. The money is then moving from that joint checking account in a small transaction to an account at the Bank of China, as well as to accounts owned by Gevrok Evimenko and GE Minerals, and ultimately being moved out to the Bank of China. When we look at how this is happening over time, we can see that it is actually exactly correlated with the online access, which is represented in red, and then represented in blue will be the transactional information. And as I create a time filter over time, we can see that Gevrok is regularly transacting with this Bank of China account. We can also then see that there is a clear pattern of the funds moving from the home equity line of credit out to the personal checking account and the joint checking account. And as we sort of follow across the week, we can see that the pattern sort of depicting as the money moves across all of these funds. So to sum up, what we did was we took 3 online profiles that appear to have something suspicious with them. Then by diving in and conducting rich analysis across all of the web logs, a massive scale data source, we were able to identify 2 devices that had actually compromised 59 other accounts that had not shown up in our automated filters. We then, just by simply diving into the transactional information of the customers that had accessed the most, we uncover a clear fraud scheme. And I won't go into the details now, but this joint checking account was set up during one of the online sessions, and then ultimately the transfers out to the Bank of China were conducted in person at a local branch with a valid U.S. driver's license. So at every turn, each individual transaction, each individual action is actually quite normal and will evade any automated filters. But when you're able to bring all of this together into one coherent picture, you can see that it's a pretty illicit fraud scheme.